Hello everyone, welcome to the 10-minute revision series. Today we are going to begin with the prose, The Best Christmas Present in the World by Michael Morpurgo. If you want a line-by-line detailed explanation and an in-depth analysis of this lesson, click on the link on the screen right now. So let's begin. Michael Morpurgo is a British producer and writer. This story by him explores the theme of war from the perspective of the soldiers involved in it. It talks of the First World War between the British and German forces that went on for more than 4 years and killed thousands of men. So that was the introduction. Let's get straight into the story now. The story begins with the narrator buying an old, used table from a junk shop in Bridport a day before Christmas. He buys it because it is made up of oak wood and dates back to the 19th century. Once home, he realizes that the table had been badly damaged. It had burn marks and a broken leg. The narrator decides to restore it. So the narrator goes to a junk shop and finds a roll-top desk. The shopkeeper tells him that it is a very old table made of oak tree wood. He finds that the table was in a really bad condition. Its roll-top was broken and one of its legs was awkwardly repaired. This table also had burn marks on its side. The narrator decides to repair it in his own workroom. He takes off the wooden sheet from its top and removes the drawers. The last drawer is stuck shut, so he has to apply force to remove it. So the narrator takes off the veneer. Veneer means the thin covering or the top layer from the table, and finds out that the last drawer was stuck fast. It wasn't moving properly. So he had to finally apply brutal, almost animal-like force to open it up. Once opened, he finds a tin box hidden inside it. On top of the tin box is a note taped with the instructions, Jim's last letter, received January 25, 1915, to be buried with me when the time comes. Inside the box is an envelope with the address of Mrs. Macpherson, to whom the letter was addressed. So he finds that there is a shallow space under that drawer where a black tin box is hidden. There is a note taped on top of that black tin box. The person who wrote the note wanted the letter to be buried with them when they die. Inside the tin box, the narrator finds an envelope with an address of Mrs. Macpherson, Jim Macpherson's wife. He finds that there is a letter inside this envelope written with a pencil and dated December 26, 1914. The narrator reads the letter. He starts to read the letter out of curiosity. It was written by Jim Macpherson, a soldier in the World War I, to his wife Connie. It was dated 26 December 1914 and describes an interesting incident. Jim writes to Connie that on the Christmas day the previous morning, he, along with the other soldiers, was standing in the trenches when they noticed the German soldiers waving a white flag along as they cheerfully screamed, "Happy Christmas," from across the border. The soldiers on Jim's side were doubtful in the beginning, however, they wished them back. So in the letter, Jim tells his wife that he is very happy because something amazing has happened. He tells her that they were standing in their trenches. Trenches means long, narrow hole or ditch, which are specifically made during the wars. You can take a look at the picture here. They were standing in their trenches on a cold, frosty Christmas morning. And he also tells her that a German soldier began waving a white flag from the opposite side of the trenches. The German soldiers decide to call for peace as they scream, "Happy Christmas," from the other side. The British soldiers, although shocked initially, but they also shout back, "Same to you," from this side of the trenches. Jim Macpherson means Hans Wolf. The German soldiers slowly approach towards the no man's land with schnapps, which is a drink, and sausages, a dish made of meat. So the Germans had approached them with a bottle of schnapps, which is a fruit-flavored drink, which is very common in Germany, and sausage. Slowly, dozens of grey coats or German soldiers started walking towards them without any rifles. A German soldier named Hans Wolf greeted Jim and introduced himself. He told Jim that he loved reading English books and played cello in the orchestra. Here's the picture of a cello. Jim remarks that Hans spoke excellent English and knew all about Dorset without ever visiting there. He also tells Connie that Hans has a wife and a 6-month-old son in his family. Jim introduces himself to Wolf as a school teacher from Dorset. They both discuss the character from Hans's favorite book and share rum and sausage. So Jim tells Connie that he met a German officer called Hans Wolf. He told Jim that he's from Dusseldorf, a place in Germany, and that he is a cellist who plays in the orchestra, the band. Jim Macpherson introduces himself and tells Hans Wolf that he's a school teacher from Dorset, West England. They also shared rum and sausage together. Hans told him that he knew a lot about England, all from school and from his books. He spoke almost perfect English, and he also told him about his favorite English author, Thomas Hardy, and his favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. Just as they were interacting with each other, they both noticed a group of German and British soldiers pitting their overcoats to make the goalposts for a game of football. The Germans won the game, and to Macpherson's surprise, Hans admits that their goalpost is wider than theirs. Jim jokes that had it been a cricket match, they surely would have won it. The two officers discuss how it would have been great if they could resolve conflicts through football matches rather than wars, which leave the children orphaned and the wives widowed. After the match, the soldiers bid goodbye to each other. During the night, they exchanged carols by singing loudly from the other side of the border. Jim tells Connie that his Christmas had been remarkable. So the soldiers start playing a game of football with each other while Hans Wolf and Jim Macpherson discuss how wars are useless and bring death and destruction. After the match, the soldiers go back to their dugouts and sing Christmas carols from across the border. Jim finally remarks that it was his best Christmas ever. After reading the letter, the author couldn't sleep and decided to drive to Bridport. Instead of a home, he finds a building burned down to the ground. A friendly old neighbor of Mrs. Macpherson tells the narrator that Connie is a lovely lady aged 101 years. She is quite muddle-headed at times. He also informs the narrator that there had been a fire in Connie's house, most probably due to the candles, and that she is staying in a nursing home named Burlington House on the Dorchester Road. So after reading the letter, it is impossible for the narrator to go to sleep. The next morning, he decides to drive straight to Bridport. There he meets a boy whom he asks where Copper Breeches was. As he reaches the address, he finds out that the house is completely burned down, its roof is wide open and the windows are shut. The narrator meets an old man who tells her that Mrs. Macpherson is 101 years old and that she's a nice lady. She was inside the house when the house caught fire, and it was most probably due to the candles that she used to use. The narrator is told that she was sent to a nursing home called Burlington House on the Dorchester Road. The narrator decides to visit the nursing home on Christmas Day to see Connie. The matron informs him that Mrs. Macpherson is not celebrating Christmas like the other people in the dining hall. She is resting in the conservatory because she feels confused. The matron offers him mince pie and tells him that Mrs. Macpherson would be happy to have a visitor as she did not have a family. So the narrator goes to the nursing home. He finds that it is decorated for Christmas. The matron or the senior nurse tells him that Mrs. Macpherson is not celebrating Christmas like the others because she is feeling muddle-headed that day. She also tells him that Mrs. Macpherson will be very happy to see him because she doesn't have a family of her own. In her room, the narrator finds Connie sitting in a chair with her hands in her lap and an empty expression on her face. Her eyes looked vacant and her hair was tied in a loose bun. He wished her Merry Christmas and gave her the tin box while describing to her how he discovered the letter. But she paid no attention to what he was saying. She starts to smile looking at his face and asks him to sit next to her and read the letter himself with tearful eyes. She mistakes him for her husband Jim and tells him that they would have Christmas cake and his favorite marzipan. So the narrator finds Mrs. Macpherson sitting on a wheelchair with her hands in her lap. Her hair was silver white and they were tied up in a loose bun. He starts to talk to her and wishes her Merry Christmas, and he returns the tin box to her. As soon as she looks at the tin box, her previously vacant or empty expressions change and her eyes show happiness. Her face is brightened up with happiness. And as the narrator keeps on explaining how he had found the letter, how he had bought the roll-top desk, he realizes that she is not listening to him at all. Connie reaches out and pulls the narrator closer and makes him sit down next to her. She calls him Jim and tells him that he was the best Christmas present in the world for her. She asks him to read the letter in his own voice. As she confuses the narrator with her husband Jim, she promises him that they will have some tea, the Christmas cake that she had baked for her, and his favorite marzipan in the evening. So that was it for the story. Now let's move on to the analysis. There's only one major theme in the story, which is futility of war, the uselessness of war and universal brotherhood. So wars never solve any conflicts. Wars never solve any problems. They just cause death and destruction. Wars are the result of politics and power struggle between people. So these leaders decide that they are going to have a war with the other nation, but they actually themselves do not go to the battlefield ever. They just pass the orders. There are simple men like Jim Macpherson who go to the battlefield, fight for their nation, and then in the process they lose their family, they lose their life, they die. Things like festivals and family mean the same to every person across the world. It doesn't matter if you belong to Germany or to Britain or to whichever army. Things like family, things like festivals, are common to all human beings. We all want to live in a community. We all want to go back to our families. So wars in the end are useless enterprises. Universal brotherhood is the only thing that can bring people together and make this world a better place. That's all for this video. Thank you.